Well, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to West Coast Cast. And today I have on this side of the chair Mike Donnelly. Mike, welcome, brother.
Hey, all right.
Today we're going to talk about the Great Tribulation, and I'm actually preaching a sermon series on this particular thing. But everybody asks, hey, what time is it? Where are we in time? And I get phone calls all over. I know that you do too, and you've really become quite a theologian.
Yeah, I mean, we're in overtime here. This should have happened already. There's nothing standing in the way now. I mean, unless you're one of those sticklers for the third temple, but otherwise, everybody else is like, well, we got the signs of the times. There's plenty of them out there. We got men's hearts growing cold. You can check all the boxes.
Man, you can definitely check the boxes. It's funny because, as we sit here, I think today actually the memorandum is going to be signed. So we have, again, another type of peace in the Middle East, Iran and the U.S., and
Mhm.
all of Iran's neighbors. I want to say everybody's got to be breathing just a little bit easier today. But it's another sign of the times, and nobody knows how long that peace will last or what it'll become. I think on the American side, we're going to think it's permanent, but I want to say it's building a huge backdrop for maybe what's very prophetic. And of course, our subject today, and we're just going to look at basically, just a piece of the tribulation period, but the Great Tribulation. Everybody wants to know when is it and how far away could it possibly be? So that's our
Yeah.
topic today. I want to say welcome as an audience. It's a little bit of a heavy topic, but
Mm.
I guess I'll start out with something a little bit lighter for the soccer fans. We've got a game in Seattle and a couple of games in Seattle right now. So the tribulation and the traffic might be apocalyptic if you're in downtown Seattle. But I want to say what a great day for sports and in our city. What do you think, Mike?
um, Well, yeah, having an event like that on a Friday afternoon, traffic's gonna be hell. I'm glad we're way out here in the exclusive hidden away podcast studio high above beautiful downtown Covington.
Oh, that's right, man. We've already brought up the hell term because traffic is going to be hell on I-5 and all the surrounding arteries. So, but it's going to be a great day in sports. And we had lunch together earlier. And what's on?
Oh, the World Cup.
The World
Everybody's
Cup,
watching it or
man.
talking about it or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm
I'm excited for a city and actually, uh, it's nice. And one of these days, we're going to get a professional basketball team again. So one of these days, maybe real soon. But to have the World Cup played here is great. And I think our city needs all the good recognition it can get. And so if World Cup brings that, hey, that's a good deal. So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
interesting. Go Sonics.
Go Sonics, man. Oh, man. So, one of the other things that really happened this week, really in our world, was we have sent containers to Nigeria, for victims of terror, people in IDP camps, people that are displaced basically due to terrorism. We've helped many Nigerians there throughout the years, and so we shipped a container. Basically, this is our second container with medical supplies, and we're probably going to do a full podcast on that and just the significance of it. But it's incredible. It landed today. It's offloaded the school that's being built in Gerku. It got all of its stuff and two X-ray machines, which is incredible. We're talking about Nigeria. These X-ray machines are actually going to go to northern Nigeria, and they don't have X-ray machines there, but they're
Mm.
fully standalone, and now they have solar power in order to generate the electricity to operate these devices. Two X-ray machines that are standalone, and I would say that's an exciting day. We're thrilled about it,
Yeah.
and
And yeah, if you guys haven't looked at our Nigeria project, it's nothing short of a miracle.
it really is. It's a miracle every single day.
I mean,
And
5 years ago or 7 years ago, it was a patch of dirt in the Nigerian countryside. And I think it was selected because nobody was shooting at them. And so, and they built it, basically from a patch of dirt. They have a farmland. They put up a school, a church, all sorts of things. You can look on our website, covingtonwac.org, and look under mission moments, and you can see the entire Nigeria story, um, all the way back. So it's like a almost a documentary book, I suppose.
Yeah, it's, Nigeria, it's pretty incredible, and it's one of the places of really some of the highest persecution on the planet, and not just for Christians, but for Muslims too, and I think
Mm.
we often forget about that. There's victims of terror crossed every single threshold, but this is a way to really help people, and, yeah, we'll do a bigger story on that, and actually, as, those goods get distributed, to their specific places, and as the school gets launched, we'll do some videos on that. And I'm going to have a good friend of mine who's also an educator is going to come in and do a podcast for us later on.
Y-
Next month, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
Ryan Price. Yeah,
that'll
looking
be
forward to
good. But
that.
yeah, this container arriving this week is nothing short of a miracle.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah,
Nobody knows. We think that we know something in America, about chicanery and, bribes and graft. But I'll tell you what, Nigeria is a different place. And Nigerian scams, they're notorious around the globe, but I mean, it is difficult to get things in. And
yeah,
for us to break through with two full containers, just full of medical supply, medicine, equipment, and then school supplies as well, that was really unheard of. And we had our own hurdles, and we'll talk more about that later, maybe.
yeah. If any of you guys tried to ship stuff to Nigeria before, it can be problematic,
But yeah,
to say the
make
least.
sure you know somebody on the other end, a lot of somebodies. And I want to say, thankful to God overall, that it arrived to its destination where it's supposed to. And
Oh yeah.
I guess we better get to the destination of our topic,
Mm-hmm.
man.
Yeah, we better get there before Christ returns,
That's right. Yeah.
because when he's here, we're going to ask him to be on the podcast. No
Yeah.
guarantees, but we'll ask him anyways.
Yeah, I got a feeling he's going to have his own channels. He already does. But
Yep.
yeah, so the Great Tribulation.
Yeah.
A lot of times, you know, topics like this, I mean, they're in the scripture. You have to train your eyes to see, what it is you're looking at, but it's hard to see things that haven't happened before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. First time I read this, and for you diehard King Jamesers, I read it from the King James, 1991. Um, and a lot of it didn't make sense. A lot of the things which they said were occurring, there was no 1991 equivalent of. So it was like they're unheard of. Um, there's a lot of things that have become possible. We're talking now 35 years.
Yeah.
Few things have changed. Everybody's got a phone now. Everybody's got connectivity. So for the first time, if two guys, even we got the giant TV here, even so, if the two guys were lying dead in Jerusalem, then we'd have it on a giant screen.
Man,
But
it's amazing the stuff that's going to happen in the future. And that's really part of the Great Tribulation period.
yeah,
So, in the sermon series, I talked about the rapture of the church and really it's imminent. And I talked about in the backdrop of the Feast of Israel, which we're going to talk about a lot more, that Israel in 1948 was really the clock began. The clock began on the process. You
yeah,
know, um, the rapture of the church, it could happen in a moment, and there's not really anything that's really stopping it now. But when the rapture of the church happens, it really closes the church age, and we really begin a whole other age, very short, but the 70th week of Daniel. And so, that closes out the church age. And I mentioned, in the rapture stuff that and the church age that Acts chapter 2 really kind of kicks off, not only the
mm,
last days, but it kicks off the church age. And people have been saved, saved through the gospel since Acts chapter 2, since Peter's preaching and the
Mm.
power of the Holy Spirit, all of that. There has been a harvest of people that have been saved ever since that day until today and until the close of the church age. I would say that's a lot of people. And I don't think anybody can estimate, you know, how many people God has saved in that period of time. And it's got to be at least billions of people, that he has saved over that course of time. So,
Yeah, it's unimaginable. You
yeah,
know, you think about the cumulative population, everybody who's lived and died, it's much bigger than 8 billion people because it's 8 billion people over, you know, 2,000 years.
it's funny because we don't think about that as a miracle, and honestly, the church doesn't even celebrate Pentecost. Not really. Maybe some
Mm.
Pentecostals, somewhere in southern
Yep.
U.S., maybe they celebrate it, but yeah, we really don't celebrate our wins, and it's like, well, okay. But that's a
Yeah.
win. That's a win every single day. Check box. People are being saved
Mm.
every day until the close of the age.
Yeah. Well, I, I had no idea what Pentecost was when I came in here into this building for the first time 4 years ago. So yeah, that's the reason I didn't celebrate it. I'm like, Pentecost, that's around Easter. Yeah, that's it's worthy of a buzzword,
Yeah.
in some places. But yeah, there's a lot of God's mystery that is just sitting in plain sight that is undiscovered.
Really have to train your eyes and your soul to really see it. But once you do,
Yeah.
it's unseeable. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't unsee it. That's a
E-
better term.
exactly. I mean, there's a few passages actually talks about that, God letting the Holy Spirit, help you understand the words, and that's definitely the case. If you just pick up the book and read it cold, it's not going to make a lot of sense unless you're into, you know, multiple languages and anthropology and all sorts of things, which you could apply human understanding to the word, understood that it was written in Greek, understood, the condition of the people at the time and the formation and fall of world governments. But, the content, the meaning of the words will completely elude you because God is way so much more than facts and figures. And
We
God's
don't
an experience.
we don't think about God being involved in history to the extent that he is. And we're going to start talking about Daniel now, the 70 weeks of Daniel, and particularly Daniel chapter 9. And what's
Mm.
powerful about that is, earlier in Daniel, we get the statue of Daniel, which starts out with a head of gold, which is Babylon, and of course the revelation is to that king. And but every world power that's ever existed exists in that statue. And the Third Reich was a 1,000-year empire, as Hitler suggested that, hey, the Third Reich, is going to last 1,000 years. It'd be 1,000 years of its kingdom, and
Mhm.
certainly he knew something about the Bible because he actually wanted to be a priest in one of his things and an artist as well. And but he became a dictator and probably one of the world's worst in history. Not the only one, and but in recent memory, I want to say that Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Mao Zedong, in our Western thought, some of the biggest dictators, Pol Pot, you know, uh, those are some of the biggest dictators. But 1,000-year reign. But guess who wasn't, um, in the statue of Daniel? Nazi Germany. It didn't
Yeah.
last 1,000 days. And so interesting to think about world history from the statue of Daniel. But Daniel chapter 9, it really goes to the 70th week. And we talked about Pentecost earlier, where there was a
Mm.
gap. There was a mystery in the church. It wasn't revealed. It was mysterion, in the Greek. But there was a
Yeah.
mystery in the church, or I want to say a mystery in the understanding wasn't revealed in Daniel's day, that there'd actually be another group from the nations who would serve the Messiah or who would serve God. And so that wasn't there. It was still a mystery. But that 70th week of Daniel, when it picks up, is pretty powerful. Did we throw up the scripture for Daniel 9?
No.
And thank you for putting this
Yeah.
together in
Yeah.
advance for us,
Mhm.
Mike.
Hey, no problem.
But so we're talking about
Mhm. There
Daniel
we go.
chapter 9, yeah, verses 24 through 27. And I'll just read through it. I think you guys can read out there, but I'll just read through it and then we'll kind of walk through a little bit of this scripture. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgressions. And so to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in the everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. There's
Oh.
some really powerful stuff in here. We'll go on and we'll look at the rest of it.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
quite a
24.
laundry list of tasks.
It is actually. Know and understand this from the time that the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, and that doesn't happen until after Daniel's time, um, um, until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 70 sevens and 62 sevens, and it will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in the time of trouble. And that's interesting because that's a future time before the Messiah returns. There's some interesting pieces in this, and let's go on and finish it. After the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. And we talked about this earlier, or we talked about it when we shot this podcast originally.
Yeah.
Sir Robert Anderson, he puts this piece right here at the triumphal entry of Jesus. The Messiah is cut off. And he'll have nothing because he was crucified.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to this. We'll finish the scripture, and then we'll get
Mm.
we'll get right into this because this is powerful. And Mike, you actually put this together, and we'll walk
Yeah.
through it. But let's go back to the scripture and finish it.
Yeah, the math is the real killer.
Yes, uh, destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. Wars will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. And do we have 27 in that?
Yeah, yeah, but, all the stuff on the screen has already come true. It's a matter of
Yeah, a lot of it
history.
has. And he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. This is the stuff that's still remaining. This is the 70th week. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to the sacrifice and the offering. And this is the abomination that makes desolate. And we'll talk more about this. But this is what this future leader, and we mentioned Adolf Hitler, and a lot of people said, hey, he was Antichrist. And a lot of people believed that at the time.
Yeah.
But this is going to be different. World War II was global and many of the other things, but this is a whole different scenario. This is a person that will actually be standing in Jerusalem and at the end or at the middle of the 7 year period. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end of the decree is poured out on him. There's a lot of stuff in Daniel. And this piece of Daniel, Daniel 11, 12, these are like keys, really, to the prophetic season. And Mike, I know you got some stuff here, brother.
Yeah, yeah, the math, has eluded me for many years, all these sevens and everything.
Yeah.
But, I think it takes up all the oxygen in the room because you're looking at this and he's writing about things to come from his vantage, and, everything that he wrote happened. So he's got a pretty good record. Daniel.
It was funny because we talked about the Feast of Israel, and we'll break that down a lot more. But those 7 feasts, that's our first key to the sevens. And Daniel mentions it. But the feast, they come to us really from Um,
The Old Testament.
from yes, the Old Testament from Genesis, God sets up the Moed, the Moedim, times and seasons. He sets it up in Genesis, and then Leviticus 23 kind of breaks it down. I want to say we'll talk about the feasts a little bit more, why that's a key. And in evangelical Christianity, it's not a key or a tool that we had until maybe 30 or 40 years ago. It was one of those things that was in plain sight in the scripture, but we really didn't have eyes to see it. We really weren't able to see why that was significant. It just appeared to be things that were Jewish or things that were ritual, of Judaism, but not having a rehearsal or a key piece. Uh, so here we go, Mike, and thank you for putting this together.
Yeah. This is interesting because after the church age, humanity has never been in this situation before. I mean, a lot of people will talk about past empires, but they're going to pale in comparison. Um, you know, this guy, this guy who's coming is not only going to be, powerful and bring world leaders in line, but he's going to be adulated. People are going to think, oh, this is the great guy. He's going to help us out. He's solution to all of our troubles. And, that's how he starts. If the bad guy showed up and he was bad right away with fire and destruction, then people be like, oh, no, not that guy. But, this guy's going to show up as a buddy.
This is a great chart, and again, Daniel 9:24 through 27. Um, the 70 weeks of Daniel, 490 years are set up. And so, we think about Jubilees, 50, 49, seven sevens,
Yep.
49. So, it's interesting to look at this kind of chart because we think of the Sabbath or sabbatical cycle. We think about it being just about Jewish holidays and the week, but it's so much more than that. Without really understanding Sabbath or the feasts of the Lord, which they were commanded by him, Israel followed them. So they became
Right.
known as the feasts of Israel, but because they're the ones who were observant of them. But this really sets up the bigger time clocks that God was operating on. But because we didn't do any of the rehearsals, we didn't do the yearly cycles, we kind of missed some of that in the illustration. But a lot of Christians today are really not only looking at the feast in personal practice, but also in prophetic practice. And I'm going to say that's what makes Daniel really powerful, because without understanding Daniel or the feast cycle or the bigger time frames of God, it's really hard to understand the prophecy.
Yep.
And I mentioned Sir Robert Anderson, and he kind of sets up this time frame, and he pretty much puts it right down to the day, the triumphal entry of Jesus when they're crying out Hosanna, the palm leaves, which which is fascinating in its own right, because
First Palm
it
Sunday.
yeah, Palm Sunday, this is when the Messiah is cut off according to the book of Daniel. The 69th week is complete, and then some, here we go back to the feast again. From that time, crucifixion, Passover, um, the day of Pentecost, the disciples are waiting, and a whole new age begins right here, phase two of God's plan. And he's the one that kicks it off. And he tells the disciples, go make disciples of the nations. And so it was like, for, every
Oh, yeah.
Jewish person who looked forward to the plan of God, they heard, 11 men heard what the rest of Judaism longed to hear, was go out and bring the nations in, go out and do what it is we've called you to do. And so, and then Christ sends the Spirit of God into Jerusalem, and the church age kicks off from there. So for every believer, Jerusalem is certainly our home church. It's where the process began. And so it's interesting, but until this age closes, the next age won't begin. And Daniel puts everything in the beginning. A peace pact is made at the beginning of the 70th week. everything begins at the beginning, and that's what's fascinating about Daniel. And I think a lot of Bible scholars look at that and they say, "How is it? What's going to be when the rapture is going to happen, or what's the timeline?" But Daniel puts it all in the beginning. That
Yeah.
the tribulation period begins at the beginning of the 70th week, and that's fascinating to look through that. And the peace pact of the Antichrist, which kicks off the judgment sequences of God, of Christ, in Revelation, chapter 5 and 6, as he begins to take the scroll and unroll it, who's worthy. That begins at the beginning of the tribulation period, the beginning of
Mhm.
that 70th week.
Yeah,
And
well,
so,
the critical piece here is that 1 week in all of this equals 7 calendar years, and, you know, if you don't know
it's a
that,
week of
then
years. Yeah.
if you don't know that, the math makes no sense at all.
Yeah. Midway, halfway through that 70th week, halfway through that 70th week is the abomination of desolation. And we've talked about this and other things, but the only thing that comes close to this, and this is why Christians should read history and maybe read the Catholic Bible like the Apocrypha, is because it tells so vividly the story of Antiochus Epiphanes, which this was a regional situation, but he sets up the abomination that makes desolate the temple. We get Hanukkah from that, and I always say that Hanukkah is on the way to Christmas. Without Hanukkah, Christmas couldn't have happened because there'd
Yeah.
be no place, no country for Jesus to be born in, no temple to keep the records, none of those things. But because without the records of his genealogy, you couldn't prove that he was from the line of David, which has to be for the Messiah, because the king comes from Judah. So, interesting to look at that. Why the halfway mark, and then the Great Tribulation takes place after that. But why there? Why the temple? Um, that is the place where God's name is historically, and his name is still there. Um, and that temple, right now, as we're talking, is getting ready to rebuild. And maybe with this piece, we might be closer to seeing the third temple go up in Jerusalem, which is interesting to think about, Mike.
Yeah, that would kick things off into fast forward.
Man,
You know, on this day of peace, right now Israel is actually sitting uh, very well because they got up this morning and they had nobody to go fight. You
you
know,
said that
their top
earlier.
4 enemies are all, they've made agreements with them, or they're making peace with them, or they turn them to dust. And it's they would if I was Israeli, I'd be really nervous right now.
Yeah.
Because that line out there, the one that says, "We have peace and security, but then sudden destruction." It still hasn't happened yet. So
That term peace in the Middle East, I tell you what, it is such a volatile term, and
yeah.
people are wore out to hear about peace talks in the Middle East right now. I mean, you won't hear that
Mhm.
in the news, but everybody wants peace, but most people believe it's elusive. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. Well, there's been many peace agreements, and they've all been broken or violated. Even the previous ceasefire was broken and violated
wow.
a bunch of times. But there's there's a lot of people that love political solutions. Political solutions never last, and
The
that's the ultimate thing. That's why politics, the way that people take it so seriously, is just not it's not worth that level of emphasis unless you're actually occupying one of the offices. But as a fan of this side or that side, all the sides, are going to come up short. And that's really what you see in Revelation.
yeah. If people are really curious about where we are in time, I would say we're just before the rebuild of the temple, and
Mhm.
uh, everything is in line for it.
Yeah.
Israelis are actually they're meeting on the Temple Mount, and it was the Israelis that kept religious people, ultra Orthodox, or the looky-loos. They kept them off the Temple Mount and praying because it was too volatile. It was the Israelis that actually were the biggest police agents. Some would say maybe that was the Jordanians or some of the Muslim groups that are there on
Mhm.
top the Temple Mount today, but the Israelis kept the Israelis out, and they did that with armed security until recently. And so I would say that we're before the days of the rebuild of the temple, and really everything's already in line for it.
Yeah, I mean, in the not too distant past, if somebody even looked sideways at the Temple Mount, the shooting would start and riots and things. And you know, it, the people threatening Israel have all had their turn, and Israel's beaten all of them. So there's nothing holding them back from just going up there and doing. That's everybody's getting ready for that to happen. We're very close to week 70. Because nowhere in Scripture does it say how long the gap is.
Yeah.
It only talks about this will happen and that will start week 70. And so we have,
Yeah, it was definitely a mystery. I think we're about the halfway point of our show, aren't we? Was that
yeah,
it? Wow. Yeah, I knew this would roll out fast, and this is actually going to be a two-part program because we'll never cover,
yeah,
really all the material, about the Great Tribulation. We won't be able to cover all of it in this piece, but yeah, the rebuild of the temple, that's really ahead of us. And I was just in Israel 8 months ago, and I was there for a pre-tour and just meeting with new partners. There's some new
mm,
stuff that's opened up, and one of the roadways to the temple, it's the Pilgrim's Tunnel. It's I think it was built in the time of the time of the first temple, but definitely for the second temple, it was a thoroughfare from the city of David up to the temple, and it's now been opened. It's beautiful. I've not seen it yet, but that'll actually be on our next tour. But that's a place where
mm,
Jesus walked, more than likely, on that road. Hold a gate, hold a steps, you know. Those would be places that he would have actually been, and of course, on the temple platform. It's interesting to think about another temple going up. And so when that goes up, I want to say that just puts us in a whole new phase.
yeah, it does. It's a huge kickoff because once the temple's there, then you can have the bad guy go to the temple and do his thing. You can have all the stuff happen, which you can't today because there's no place for the bad guy to go. He could show up and be all glad handing folks at the big international summits and making peace, but he can't go to the temple and cause trouble because there isn't one. So he will have to, those people that are looking for that last minute deal, when you see him, you'll know, okay, the last minute already happened. There's nothing left but the fire.
When Daniel is living through the book of Daniel, um, Israel was in exile. They were outside of the land, and so the land got its rest, everything else, but the temple was virtually destroyed. And so when Israel finally goes back, they rebuild the temple, rebuild the walls, etc. And so it's funny that, Daniel, funny in a strange way, that Daniel mentions, the rebuild of the temple. And because that was something that didn't exist, and the temple was rebuilt. Solomon's temple was rebuilt. And then later,
Mm,
Herod's temple replaced it as that temple was taken down stone by stone and then replaced by an even grander scale. And the temple platform and all of that came later. But basically, Herod rebuilt the mountaintop. All of the catacombs that were underneath,
mm,
all of that was basically rebuilt by Herod. It was the largest uh, worship structure in the world at the time. The
mm,
cost of it is, and we talked about this in an earlier podcast, the
mm.
cost of it was more than any other project for faith or serving God ever in history. I mean, it's more than, more than the stuff we have in outer space. It's unbelievable the sheer expense that it
Yeah.
took to build it. And
Yeah.
another temple is going to go up, and it's just in front of us, actually.
Yeah, I heard they have a lot of they have a lot of the supplies stored nearby. And one guy was saying they can do it in 17 days.
Um,
And I'm like, 17 days? Hmm.
the Daniel prophecies, they're powerful in their own reason, but without really looking at Daniel, and I want to say we've done a Chris review of, what Daniel is. We kind of went to the quick, fast, and a hurry to the tribulation, some of the key tribulation scriptures, but um, um, the rapture, the second coming, the Great Tribulation, rebuild of the temple. Um, I want to say, unless you know where to pick up, it's hard to just read the Bible and know that this is exactly how it is because it doesn't exactly come out in a complete storyline. So I want to say that to look at these things, um, you really have to follow what it is that God is saying. Look at those key things, and why it's important.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of corollary evidence that goes along with this, right? You have other things in the world, regular stuff. Well, not regular stuff, but things more normal to humanity have to happen first. Um, we'd have to see. Well, Israel became a nation again. We already saw that. Um, you know, Christ the Messiah was here and he was sacrificed, and we already saw that too. Um, we have all of these things that have already happened. And what's really interesting is that Christ even tells you what to look for,
This is good, Mike.
but that's not it.
It's
Uh,
more than just Daniel that tells a story, isn't it?
yeah, the whole book actually starts to deal, right? So, for instance, Christ tells his friends, because those will be the days of distress unequaled from the beginning when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. So, unequaled distress. Now, when the Messiah comes and tells you these will be the days of unequaled distress, be like, I'd like to be somewhere else, please. um, if the Lord had not cut short these days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. So,
It's powerful. No one would survive except for the sake of the elect. Um, Mark is, I preached on Mark just a few years ago, and Mark is kind of the action gospel. I mean, if there was an action adventure gospel, Mark would
hmm,
certainly be it. And it was written to the Roman world, to the Gentile world. And Mark's powerful in that way. But um, for those will be days of distress unequaled from the beginning. And that's the beginning of everything. So, we look
yeah,
at like the days of Noah. That's
yeah,
also part of this scenario.
exactly. The Great Flood,
Great
the
flood.
all of the massacres that have gone on, all of the wars. That I mean, I think there's lots of terrible things that can be remembered. Everybody likes to bring up Pompeii.
Yeah.
That's always something. But you know, um, that's the kind of timing we're looking at. The people of Pompeii, they went to bed thinking everything was great. 3:30 in the morning, boom,
Yeah.
you're a rock
Here's your
person now.
volcano.
Yeah,
It's actually so well documented in ancient history too, and people who watched the destruction of Pompeii, and there was plenty of warning signs for it too, but people still died. They couldn't escape fast enough. And I
yeah,
want to say disasters kind of like that. And some people stay just to watch, and then they can't escape. And YouTube is full of videos of people looking at like tidal waves, tsunamis, and you
mm-hmm,
know volcanoes. They couldn't get out of the way fast
yeah.
enough.
Now the Messiah has promised unequaled disasters never seen before from the beginning of creation. You- Now you use those as the high water mark, and
Yeah.
you're like, how much worse can it get?
I
And
I wanted to talk a little bit about, precedents. And so there's not been many times when God has judged the whole planet. The flood of Noah, and Jesus mentions it, it'd be like the days of Noah, and maybe not in the flood scenario because we won't see that again.
oh yeah.
Um, but it's not been many times, except for that one, that God judged the entire planet. We can look at things like Sodom and Gomorrah, and you can still go there and you can find the actual brimstone, the sulfur, it still ignites. And
Hmm.
it's unimaginable. And you can see the archaeological evidence, you know, of the burnt ash. So if you dig down, you'll find the old city people, and you can still find bone debris, which is bizarre that you would actually go there. And so if you ever doubt that, oh, maybe there were people there, just do a dig in that area. If you can get permission from the Israelis, do a dig in that area and you'll find all kinds of stuff that you didn't expect to find. The archaeological evidence for the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, it is all there. Uh, the biblical description is defined by the archaeology that's there today.
Yeah, and that's this is all a warm up for what's coming. And
So warm up. The flood is the only time that God judged the whole earth, and he judged the fallen ones that were here. He judged the violence and viciousness of humanity on the planet. Those civilizations was destroyed, and basically it started afresh with Noah and his family. But that is the only time that we've ever seen global judgment. The whole earth changed after that, and it was an unprecedented time. And it's funny, we live in the wake of the flood narrative. For 120 years, Noah preached, laughable. He was a comedian to most of the world.
hmm,
There'd never been rain, there'd never been a global flood, there'd never been any of that kind of stuff. Uh, and so, yeah, it was novelty to the world. And they didn't stop them from doing what they're going to do. And I think a lot of times now, um, I think looking at a, prejudgment scenario, Great Tribulation, things like that, people have the same kind of impression. A couple of years ago, it's a couple of 20
hmm.
years ago, I heard a newscaster from a major news agency say, well, that's about as likely as the second coming, as if it was laughable and a joke. And, I don't know if they ever use that punchline again, but I was like, wow, that's pretty bold.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
pretty bold statement, but I don't think people have a real handle on what that judgment of the Great Tribulation will be about.
Yeah, well, it's like you said in the gratuitous YouTube short. Go check out our channel. Like and subscribe, right?
Like and
But
subscribe,
yeah,
man.
you said
Smash that like button.
that people would continue to live in disbelief, even seeing what's in front of them, and that they would not change, even given the chances. They'll just do what they want to do.
The unequaled from the beginning, but what Jesus says about this is the time will be short because it is so severe. And I want to say, when have you ever read anything like that? That it's just so severe, it's so over the top that for the sake of the elect, for the sake of humanity, for the sake of those, they're going to come through the process, whether, right straight into the millennial kingdom, or for the sake of their lives, God cuts the time short. I want to say, man, that's serious. That's a pretty serious time. We've not read about anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you're gonna have an unequal disaster, you have an exit package for your friends. You
I'm thinking about every disaster movie that's ever been made. What was the
Yeah,
last one? 2012, and that was
yeah.
based on the disaster scenario, into the world scenario
Hmm.
from the Mayan calendar, and there's plenty of calendars out there. We've got plenty of ideas and speculation about what the end will look like, global, floods and 1,000-foot tsunami waves and we
Mhm.
can imagine some pretty terrible stuff, and AI can really generate some pretty gruesome images, but, um,
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of that going around.
yeah,
That's the thing is, this is adding up to something really disgusting. As a matter of fact, I mean, first off, you have the buildup, where he says this is going to be the worst thing ever,
yeah.
you know, and when the Messiah says it's going to be the worst thing ever, it's probably not going to be great.
It's funny,
Uh,
Daniel talks about the stone that basically wipes out all of the impact of nations and, the stone basically, made without hands. Um, that stone really sweeps away human history. Uh, Human history as we've known it will basically go in the dustbin of history.
Oh
It'll
yeah,
be rewritten again in a better way.
yeah, yeah. During that transitional period, life will become disassembled. The people that are still here, if they are say you're gonna be basically still here in the middle of a famine, in the middle of several wars. Um, what else is going on at the time? Oh yes, the sun's gonna take 4 hours off every day.
Solar events,
The moon will also be taking 4 hours off each
yeah,
night, and that's interesting. But you know, there's going to be the dreaded demonic locusts, of course,
yeah.
and
We
we're
haven't
going.
had that
Yeah,
before, the demonic armies and the things
yeah.
that are described, although some people would say some people look possessed, when they fight in battle, but
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. My mind went right back to the stuff that happened in Egypt.
wow.
You know, um, instead of locusts, they had what was it, grasshoppers?
Yeah,
Lots of grasshoppers, and these grasshoppers were not your average like Jiminy Cricket. They were huge, and they had like faces that looked like people. So they were not good grasshoppers.
unparalleled in human history, the Holocaust, it didn't bring the return of the Lord, although it brought great tragedy, and it really brought the return of many Jews who had no place to go after the war, after World War II. Arguably, World War I and World War II were some of our worst wars in global history. And I mentioned earlier that, not in this podcast, but in another, that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. 65 million people died worldwide just in World War II. It's almost, you almost can't estimate, what, the amount of death that happened just in World War II alone. World War One, again, millions of people died. And it wasn't just necessarily from the direct conflict or that they were combatants, but a third of Judaism died during the Holocaust. But in the tribulation period, two-thirds of Judaism, according to the scriptural narrative, two-thirds of them will perish. This is an event that's
Mm,
worse than the Holocaust. And I say that with some caution, being Jewish myself, that it's unimaginable. And we hear the term nie wieder, the German term, never again. But to think about something that could be on a scale that's beyond that, and for humanity, where you have in the opening sequences of the tribulation period of judgment, you have billions of people die, a third of humanity, a quarter of humanity in several scenarios. And
yeah.
that is just, we've not seen a time like this, a time that would be cut short for the sake of the elect and for the sake of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, just running the numbers, you have 8 billion people today. That's 2 billion right off the top. That's a lot. And in another place, it's like a quarter of the people are also gone. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know.
In a 7-year time frame.
So it's a quarter of the people first, then a third of the people later, a third of
Wow.
the survivors,
Wow.
you know. Everybody's talking about, the 144,000, 144,000, which is great. But, you know, after you start running the math and you look, 144,000 may be all that's left,
Yeah.
or pretty close to it. I mean, this is like 2 point something million people when you multiply it by 12. And, you know, almost that many people were killed in the desert. So it's amazing. And these guys are surrounded by the imagery, of the tribes, which is the when you're talking about the desert formation, really is when you bring up the whole deal with the tribes and you list all the tribes because they're assigned place around the thing. But 144,000 from each tribe, that would be probably the whole tribe in some cases. I know there's one tribe right now that has a problem. They can't find enough people. So God's going to have to show up and gather the people. Hey, you're in a tribe.
It's funny, this is an interesting piece here, and the 144,000, it's kind of funny because they're still mysterious in our time frame, and one of the reasons why in, like, Orthodox Judaism and from the great ones of Judaism, uh, that Jesus, or I should say, the Messiah, he has to do or be 3 things. He has to bring world peace, world shalom. That's one of the things. We don't have that. You know, um, uh, he has to be he has to be alive. He has to be in his body. So messiahs, and we look at the prototypes, they were priests or kings. David, of course, he was anointed. He's a messianic figure. He's a Messiah figure.
Yeah.
Um, so all of those guys were anointed for their purpose, but they're alive in their bodies. He has to be able to identify also um, the tribes of Israel, which the tribes, and many people have tried to, in Judaism and Christianity, tried to kind of comb through the dilemma, the problem. But right now, nobody knows where 10 of those tribes are. And so British Israelism tried to like solve that issue,
Mm,
World of Tomorrow, who are the 144,000.
mm,
But it is only the Messiah who can identify them. It is yet to be done, and it will be done by Jesus because the book of Revelation is his revelation. He's the last prophet. He's the last prophet of the age, and he identifies who they are and sends, they're especially sealed and anointed by him. It is after the church age, it is in the age before the Messiah returns. They have a special role in ministry. And it's interesting to look at a comparison between the tribes that are mentioned, like in Exodus, and we look at
mhm.
Deuteronomy, we look throughout the Torah and we see that they're mentioned, and then we see the list that Jesus gives us. So take a look at that, do some homework, and take a look at the who's there. Um, but this 144,000 evangelism goes back to them. It goes back to the house of Israel. The church age now, both Jews and Gentiles, and particularly, it was carried on the backs of the Jews in the beginning,
Mhm.
but has been carried now by Christianity, has carried the gospel message and the
Yeah.
message of the kingdom.
They're long gone too. I mean,
They'll be gone when these guys appear, and um, but they'll have a special role. They're the only ones, and only Jesus knows who they are because they're yet
mhm.
unidentified. So they're still out there in the world. I think that this is going to be a group of Orthodox Jews that are currently, and others that are currently in Israel as God draws back people, Jews, to Israel. He's going to call these folk back, and they are unidentified, but they may be the very ones who are able to identify the Antichrist and work for the claims of Jesus and this kingdom that will honestly only be years away. And from the midpoint of the tribulation, you can count the days that it will be. And so evangelism changes at that point. And as this number is interesting for another reason too, is because they're the only people that are that will make it through the tribulation period. It's that tough. 144,000 people are sealed and anointed. They're specifically named, and they're, so all those people that have tunnels and have stored up food and preppers, and I have nothing against prepping because we should be prepping in some way. We should be preparing for the return of the Lord. But they're the only ones that are going to make it. And I will say that for Israel that flees into the desert, into a special place, which could be Petra, um, that's the only place. If you're going to put a container underground someplace, start doing it in Petra. Start doing it in Jordan, because there's going to be a special place for them to go, and it's mentioned in Scripture. No other place. As a matter of fact, there's warnings about, weep and howl. Your riches will dissolve, but people will dig in and they'll bury in. And that is pretty spooky stuff, that there'll be no guarantee. But this 144,000 that's identified, in the tribulation period, they will make it through the end. And they'll literally walk into the messianic kingdom when Jesus returns. What a thing that will be. Some of these people here, and people who are unnamed, who come through this period saved, they'll walk in and they'll probably live 1,000 years on this planet through the kingdom age. I would say we haven't even imagined that, and I would say it's beyond our imagination.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that a lot of people think, okay, this big religious event's going to happen. Things will get messy for a couple of years. No, this is the end of the line for
Yeah,
this earth. Okay, there's nothing left except this. Um, you know, things are going to get worse. Uh, Christ will return at some point. Uh, 1,000 years will go by, and when he's ready and he's done, then he's going to make a new planet.
wow,
This one is finished. It's
wow.
terminal.
So our next piece is actually the mathematics of Daniel, and I think you also have that up on a slide. But I think we're actually getting close to our hour mark. What do you think, brother?
Oh yeah, 57 minutes.
So we're 57 minutes in.
Yeah.
So probably what we're going to do is we're going to save for our part two. We're going to save our Daniel mathematics. So we kind of deep dived, and we shot this originally without sound. We shot this podcast originally, and we actually got farther along. But this was kind of interesting. I want to say there's always a reason for everything, but to really kind of deep dive the 144,000 and some of the other things, and Daniel 9, 24 through 27. We didn't deep dive it as much as we did on this. And so, but we're going to go into the math of the Daniel prophecies, and we'll talk again maybe about uh, Sir, uh, Sir Arthur Roberts. And
Ooh, okay.
yeah, did I get that right? It's not Arthur, but it's
Sir Robert Anderson.
Sir Robert Anderson. That's right.
Yep.
And so, yeah, we'll deep dive and we'll talk about that. Mike, it's always a
Mm,
pleasure. We're gonna
Yep.
sit back and we're gonna talk about the rest of
Yep.
this. And I sure thank you for the slides that you've done and just
Yep.
your preparation for this conversation. And
Yeah, we have a lot of material to go over, and a lot of it we didn't even get to today. But what you see here is something else that never happened before in the history of the world, and that is, at some point, you know, God, who's always generating, who's always living, who's always moving forward, who's always creating, who's always building. At some point, he's just gonna hit stop on the old machinery, and he's gonna start unbuilding, because somewhere right after Revelation 7, you see that things start to go backwards. This gets destroyed and that burns up, and this doesn't shine for a quarter of the day. All of these things happen where you've got basically the stalwart bare bones of existence breaking down.
Wow.
It's like, what if you got up tomorrow morning and the sun didn't rise? You
Spooky stuff, man.
Then, it's like,
Yeah.
uh, what if if you see this kind of thing happen and you're looking for it, then there's trouble. And if you don't know it, then you're going to probably Facebook it or YouTube it and go, hey, look at this. Cool. But
Man.
yeah, the things coming, though, are not cool. And things are going to get unbelievable. You think food prices are high right now and gas prices are high right now? They're a walk in the park.
It's funny when I did the sermon for this, yeah, I talked about whenever, people in ministry talk about, the Great Tribulation and stuff, it's like, well, let's get out our sandwich board and head to a street corner, and oh, the end is near. But, in
Repent ye.
reality, yeah, we've got to talk about it, because honestly, everybody wants to know. And I did this whole sermon series and really this podcast by request. People requested it. And it was like, well, maybe we should talk about it and do a podcast on it. And we've still
Yeah.
got more to go. I mean, there's more stuff for us to see. And I would say that if you've enjoyed this podcast, like it, share it, subscribe. And Mike, it is always a pleasure. I thank you so much for everything that you prepared, really, for this podcast and the future ones that go with this. But it's been incredible, Mike, and it's always incredible to share this time and this space with you. And again, I want to thank you as an audience for your time and for your attention to this subject matter.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. And yeah, tune in next week for part 2.
Part